Hello and good morning, everybody. Just a little bit of housekeeping while we wait for everybody to join. We are recording this session, so if you've booked in via the ICB website, we will send you by email a copy of that recording. And if you've got any questions, it doesn't matter how tricky or how trivial they may seem, please do put them in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen, and say hi in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're coming from, so that everybody knows that you're here. This can be a fantastic session. So a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. This is almost the end of National Apprenticeship Week 2022. We've had great fun celebrating apprenticeships. And one of the reasons we love apprenticeships here at ICB is because they give people an opportunity to learn while they earn. And ICB supports and gets involved with 3 apprenticeship standards: accounts or finance assistant, assistant accountant, and the one we're really going to be focusing on today, which is the payroll administrator apprenticeship, and that's a level 3. I am joined today by some fantastic people who know a great deal about apprenticeships and learning. First of all, we've got ICB Head of Learning, Director of Learning, Peter Stewart. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we've also, this is quite special, you know him very well if you watch Wages Wednesday, but Ian Holloway is in fact the chair of the Trailblazer for the Payroll Standard Apprenticeship, and we'll be finding out a little bit more about that later. Good morning, Ian, how are you doing?
Morning.
Good morning, lovely to see you again. And today, a special guest, Mark Bremner, who runs the apprenticeship training provider NBKB. Good morning, Mark.
Morning. Hi, everyone.
So maybe if I can start off with you, Mark. We've been working together with you very closely, haven't we? And supporting lots and lots of payroll apprenticeships in the last year or so. Fundamentally, what is it that you love about apprenticeships, and what kind of success do employers and apprentices have?
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to join you. I appreciate it, and to be amongst such esteemed colleagues as well this morning. So thank you for that. I think what we love about apprenticeships is the flexibility to be able to develop an individual around their organisation and from their starting point. The new types of apprenticeship standards allow us to do that by looking at what prior learning the individual's got. There's nothing worse than being taught something that you know over and over. I remember many years ago having to do, and many years ago, doing a level 5 in management. At the time I was running my own organisation and had to do a unit on how to set up and run a team meeting. So those sorts of days have changed now, where we can be flexible. And the beauty of the payroll administrator level 3 is it's the first full qualification that covers everything that a payroll administrator requires and really does set them up for a future career. The way we do it at NBKB is we've taken all the learning outcomes and the modules, broke them down into different training modules, and they can be put together in any order. So a bit like a Lego house, people can build their career around that, and knowing at the end of it, they've got everything they need to succeed.
Amazing. Okay, and what kind of person can get an apprenticeship? It's not just young people, is it?
No, absolutely not. So it's the opportunities are there for school leavers, so they can do, if you like, I suppose the easiest way to explain it is 100% of our program. But moreover, it's an opportunity to develop people that are already in the area. They might want to enhance certain areas such as pensions or systems and processes, or get up to date with legislation. What we do at NBKB is that we've got a skills analysis, which is a breakdown of the qualification. It says, where are you at? You rate yourself 0 to 10. 10, I'm an expert in that module, or 0, I know nothing. And that then allows us to not only discount down the program so they can get as much as up to 30% off, so it's much cheaper than the advertised cost, but also they can reduce their length of stay as well, so they'll be on a program for 12 to 14 months as opposed to 18 to 24 months for a youngster. So it can be tailored. I think approximately 70% of our payroll apprentices are experienced with 2 to 3 years at least, but they want that wraparound knowledge that this qualification gives them.
Right, that's very interesting. Well, so most of our attendees today are ICB practices, so presumably looking to either take on an apprentice, but hearing that is really important. So you can use an apprenticeship to upskill existing employees, and age is no barrier. So it's you've got to be at least over 16 years old and not in full-time employment. If you want to just pop in the chat, who does that apply to? The apprentice you had in mind, if you can just say yes, was the apprentice you had in mind over 16 and not in full-time, sorry, I said it wrong, didn't I? Full-time education. So you do need to be employed, of course. So just tell me yes if that applies to you. Of course, it's possible if you're running your own business and you're an employee of that business, you could become an apprentice yourself. Is that right, Mark? Is that a kind of a scenario that ever happens?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. And particularly with the payroll level 5, we've seen a big uptake in that. So I know the hard work that you guys have put into developing it. So yes, it's a progression opportunity, but also we find ourselves, a lot of managers have seen the benefits of doing the level 3 apprenticeship and think, actually, you know, I wouldn't mind a little bit of that myself. So they've gone on and done the 5, or perhaps a leadership one as well. So yeah,
that's
we do
great.
find that.
So there's a progression route, and I love that idea of it being tailored so that you really don't mess around. There's no, what do you usually call it? You say flab, I think, don't you, Peter? No flab. You can just go for what you need. Now, let's talk about funding, because obviously a lot of large employers are taking up apprenticeships. But if you are like the majority of businesses in the land with a pay bill under, it's 300 million, isn't it, a year? Is that right? 3 million. Okay, 3 million. Probably still, where most of us are within that bracket. You actually get 95% of your training funded by the government. So what percentage would you say, Mark, of your the employees that you work with are actually managing to get that funding?
100% of the people that we work with are able to access that funding. In terms of the number of organizations that are what we refer to as co-funded, so there's expected to be a 5% contribution from them because they're non-levy payers. I would suggest probably about 15% of the organizations that we work with now fall into that bracket. We've also got some good news on that, because we work with a lot of organizations that have massive levy pots where they've got underspend. We can often share that with the SMEs. So just because they're not a levy payer themselves doesn't necessarily mean that they have to pay that 5%, because we've got some very large organisations, and particularly in the West Midlands, there's access through the West Midlands Combined Authority where they can levy share. So that's another option as well. And so, you know, our sort of recruitment team can advise on that. So the 5% is a worst case scenario, but we aim to get it 100% funded, irrespective of the organisation size.
Really? That's incredible. Okay. And yeah, that's probably one of the biggest questions is if you're not looking to upskill your existing staff and you're looking for someone new, how do you go about that recruitment? Okay.
Well, we've got a recruitment team as well. So there's various platforms that we advertise on, and we utilize social media, and we do have a bank of people that are interested in applying as well. So it depends on, I suppose an easy example, if you're looking for a new payroll administrator, city centre, Birmingham, Manchester, London, we can find that within a week. If you're further out, I'm not going to name remote villages, but if you're in a remote village, it might take us a little bit longer to do that. But the recruitment process is built around what you need. So we've a base template. We send that to you. That would be amended by each employer for what their specific requirements are. We then advertise it, and then we've got various levels of filtering. We can send every applicant if the employer wants, or we can send the top sort of 10% or 50% of applicants, however they want us to do that. And that's free of charge, completely free of charge service.
It almost seems too good to be true, I would say. Let's ask Ian a question. So Ian, you're the chair of the Trailblazer. Can you tell us a little bit about what that role entails and how it keeps the apprenticeship standard relevant?
Well, when I first took it over, which was at the back of 2017, things were not going well with the previous trailblazer. So what it actually first involved was getting together a group of people that actually wanted to contribute, but making sure that they were from different sectors as well. So I made sure that there was a small business on there, a large business, private sector, public sector. I had a couple of colleagues on there that I knew would input. So I tried very much to cover as much of the sector as I possibly could. Plus, what it also involves is engaging with people like Mark, apprenticeship training providers, and endpoint assessment organisations as well, because the trailblazer are the ones that actually put together the apprenticeship. I am really, people say, oh, it's Ian Holloway's apprenticeship. It's not my apprenticeship. I'm just the one in the middle that coordinates all of the views. So I listen to what apprenticeship training providers say. I listen to what the likes of the ICB say, and then listen to what the trailblazer says. And then I put it together to the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. And together we come up with an apprenticeship. But what you said about keeping it up to date is really, really important. Because when we put it together in 2018, obviously there were some things in there that are no longer relevant, but more, there's new things that have come on board. So it's the responsible and it's the requirement that the Trailblazer is reformed and we revisit. And again, I chat to Trailblazer about that. I was talking to them this morning, and I will chat to people like Mark, and I'll chat to the ICB. Because the whole idea of it is to make it a robust apprenticeship, an appropriate apprenticeship for the profession, but it has to be a deliverable one. So apprenticeship training providers have to be able to deliver it, and it has to be one that is capable of being assessed. I could put together, or the Trailblazer and I could put together the most wonderful apprenticeship, but if people like Mark can't deliver it and people like the ICB can't assess it, well, the whole thing's useless. So it really is engaging with civil servants at the Department for Education, the Trailblazer, apprenticeship training providers. And that's why I have no hair, to be honest. I was like Michael Jackson before.
That sounds like a real collaboration. So Peter, knowing what you know about ICB's main professional qualification route, how relevant is the apprenticeship route, particularly in payroll, and how does it line up with the rest of our qualifications?
It lines up particularly well. Those people on the webinar who are our members and have taken our exams will appreciate that what we set for our core qualifications and for the extras, such as the payroll diploma or the level 4 certificates, everything that we do is driven by what the candidate will end up doing in a place of work. So the practical exams around a practical syllabus. It's not something that's been developed by academics who want to say, oh, what's at the cutting edge of theoretical research, blah, blah. It's when you get this qualification, you're going to walk into a place of work and be expected to do something, to do it accurately, to do it completely. And the apprenticeship standards that we are assessing all match that. So the level 3 assistant accountant is so closely linked to our core qualification up to our M5 exam. It's so closely linked to it that we are quite satisfied that an apprentice who completes that standard can come straight into our qualification. There's a couple of gaps. They do a fast track assessment to check that they've learned about what was in those gaps, and then they can become a member. And likewise with the payroll, it's so closely, it's not identical to the diploma syllabus, but it's very, very close to it. So we are really confident, and we see it in the assessment. We see that the people who get through the endpoint assessment, they are very good payroll practitioners at that level. We would be absolutely confident to send them into any workplace, and there's a job description or kind of a job description in the apprenticeship standard, and the people who come through, we know can do it because the assessment is so practical. It's scenario based. It says, here's an employee who's been off work for a few days or a couple of weeks. What happens with their statutory sick pay? This person's about to go on maternity leave. What's their entitlement? Da, da, da. This person lives in Wales. Do they qualify as a Welsh taxpayer? Yeah, and it's so practical. It's so well designed. I'm sound like I don't want to make the rest of Ian's hair fall out, but it just breeds confidence in the successful apprentice, and that, as you know, Amy, that's exactly what our qualification does for bookkeepers. So it's kind of easy for us to assess because it's how we assess anyway.
Wonderful. So it is a real alternative to the normal professional qualification route. I mean, Mark, why do you think, as an alternative, so I suppose the other option would be for somebody to say to their employee, here's a couple of textbooks, or, you know, just learn it the way we do it here. Why are people coming to, you know, training providers like NBKB and choosing that apprenticeship route if it's kind of roughly equivalent to another sort of route?
I think there's a couple of primary differences, and I think the key one, I guess, is the one-to-one support that you get from training providers. So there's a lot of coaching and mentoring as well. So, you know, we'll tend to deliver a module, say manual calculations, child-related pay, but then we follow up that with the coaching element. So, okay, so how does that relate to your organization? You know, have you got any staff members that you can actually run that calculation? You may well have done it on XYZ software, but let's take it off there and do it manually. And then there's the mentoring support that follows that on, that, you know, 6 months later or 12 months later, they can get back in touch and say, I've got a query on this, you know. And I think it links nicely to what Ian was saying about the update, because as obviously you guys know, you're constantly updating your endpoint assessment and requirements. We're constantly rewriting and updating our legislation to bring in everything that changes, the furlough, CGRS, off payrolling, the devolution things moving on. So, you know, it's consistently being developed. I think one of the other key things that many training providers do, not just us, is that support above and beyond the apprenticeship. And an example of that I can give you is that everybody that has passed our apprenticeship standard with yourselves, you've probably got a list of all their names because they've all gone through you, have recently been reached out to by us and said, we've got our HR and legislation update in March. Here's a free place for you. So I think that's the support that you get from training providers. Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely fabulous. We've got a couple of practical questions about how the courses run. Valerie and Pause, I don't know whose Pause they are, asks, does the employee have to be employed full time?
So no, they don't have to be employed. Their contract of employment needs to outlast the length of stay on the apprenticeship. So if they're part-time, we are under funding rules. So on average, it's, let's say, 18 months for a level 3. So their contract needs to be realistically 2 years, just in case there's any slippage, you know, because sometimes life gets in the way. If they're part-time, we are expected by the government to extend that length of stay to allow for that. So it would be more like 2.5 years. So they would need a 3-year contract. So the contract of employment ultimately has to outlast the apprenticeship. And it, irrespective of their competence or starting point, they have to be on the apprenticeship for a minimum of 12 months.
Right.
Realistically, the very shortest contract they need is 14 months post start date on the apprenticeship.
And is there any minimum hours that they have to work?
No, there isn't. They can be part-time, you know, on I suppose 0 hours contract. The apprenticeship would then probably be set for about 3.5 years. That's the only downside to it. So it's a bit of an oxymoron that the shorter hours they work, the longer the apprenticeship is. You'd think it'd be the other way around, because in theory, they could do some...
Less means less.
Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't work that way, because there's 20% off the job, etc. But
yeah, so yes, just clarify that for us. So how much of the job is going to be involved in training?
Okay, so for the funding requirements, I suppose the headline of that is that the employer has to release their apprentice for 20% of their working hours to carry out the apprenticeship work itself, so to develop new skills. So it's called 20% off the job.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes send people running to the hills, because the maths of it suggests day release. It's not day release. What it means is there's a commitment from the employer to allow their apprentice to develop new skills. Now, that's not just time spent with us or another training provider. It can be time spent work shadowing. It can be time spent in with a senior manager or on a new project. So the 20% off the job can be doubly beneficial, because it means the apprentice can be learning new skills, but also still productive in the workforce. And the easiest example I can give you, we work with a very well-known parcel distributor in the UK, and their payroll department is very secular: full-time, part-time, expenses, pensions. They've got apprentices working in all of them, and they rotate. So 1 week of the month, someone from full-time will then work in pensions. That means that that week is counted as their 20% off the job, because they're learning new skills, but the business isn't losing any man time or man hours or person hours, because they're still productive, just in a different department that's new to them.
Just couldn't really get any better, could it, Peter? We pride ourselves at ICB on very flexible, accessible exams. They're obviously the toughest in the business, but they're available whenever you like. How does ICB, when and how does ICB get involved in the payroll apprenticeship, and how accessible are those exams?
Yeah, I'd first of all just come back on the bit about toughness. They are tough if you haven't undertaken sufficient learning and been supported all the way through. If you know your stuff, they're straightforward. And they actually, that's not just a chat line. They genuinely are. It is simulating what you do at work. And before you encounter ICB as an apprentice, you've been through a course of learning, you've had on-the-job training, and both Mark or NBKB and the employer have got their heads together and said, this person should be put forward through what's called the gateway, and beyond the gateway there are the sunlit uplands of the endpoint assessment, where ICB is waiting to assess you. Yeah, that's when we officially sort of first meet the apprentice. So we're not involved in the training, we're not involved in their on-the-job elements. And then what happens next depends on the standard, and because the standard has a set assessment plan. So for the payroll, there are 3 components to it. One is a multiple choice test. And again, those people on the call who have done the R level 3 payroll diploma, there's a slight difference in here, and our multiple choice component of that exam does include calculations and stating the correct figures, whereas the apprenticeship, the endpoint assessment, is kind of a set of questions that say, do you know the fundamentals? Now, each apprenticeship sets out to say, is somebody competent? Have they acquired sufficient knowledge, skills, and behaviors? And Ian and his team, the employers, say, well, what should people know? What skills should they develop, and how should they behave? So the multiple choice is pretty much entirely knowledge. So it's reasonably quick test. We deliver that exactly the same as we do any of our ICB exams. That is, it's online. We use the Rogo platform. People on the call who have done the M8 exam or final admitting exam over the last 2 years will know the remote invigilation platform that we use, Proctor Exam. Obviously, it's a high stakes government funded apprenticeship, so we make sure that it's the right person. There's an ID check. We've got full recording of people doing their assessments. We can hear them doing their assessments, so we sometimes hear things that maybe we wouldn't be putting forward to the X Factor, but yeah, there's singing, there's shouting, I've not heard too much bad language, but anyway. So we monitor that, and then the next stage, once they're successful in that, they move on to what we call the role simulation, which is a scenario. Here's the business that you're working for. This is the I don't know, maybe this is the HR manager, or this is someone's line manager, and their employee has come to them asking questions about what will happen when they go on maternity leave, or if they've been off sick, or various different entitlements and things that are happening. Why is my tax code what it is? How does that end up in how much I'm being paid? So they have to do calculations that demonstrate, again, the knowledge and the skills come in here, and they have to do communication exercises where they'll write emails back to the person who asked that task. And really, this is why I'm saying it's not that it's scary, but you've just got to role play almost and just say, okay, this is a real employee. So I'm typing out, oh, dear person, you know, oh, congratulations, it's great to hear that you're pregnant, you know, hope everything goes well. As regards your maternity pay, and then they come out with that. So, and as assessors, we look into that just to see, have they got the calculations right that says that the pay that they will be getting, or the deductions that are being made are accurate. And then we look at that communication and say, have they given that person sufficient information for them to go away and be happy about what's happening? You know, it can't be too brief. It can't just say all the information is on .gov.uk, go and look it up. You've got to pretend that this is a colleague who you want to keep in their good books, and likewise, you know, maybe when it comes down to their leaving party pre-maternity, they'll invite you and buy you a drink. So I don't think I've ever given that advice to any apprentice. Mark, maybe you can incorporate that in the program.
Yeah, I've been making notes.
That sounds like a really relevant way to run an assessment.
Oh, it is so impressive. It really is. And I can say that because I didn't design it. I'm looking from the outside and applying what I've been told to apply. The final stage is we call it a professional discussion. And that's where one of our assessors, so we've got independent assessors. They don't work for NBKB. They are engaged by ICB, but they're not ICB employees. They are payroll experts, I would say. And they get on a 1 hour Zoom calls or whatever technology is used, and they have a conversation with the apprentice. And it's kind of an interview. There's certain things, and this is where they sort of probe into the skills and mostly the behaviors, and say, did you ever have a situation where an employee highlighted a problem and asked you to deal with it? What did you do? How did you handle it? So it's called a professional discussion. People might think of it as an interview. And again, the assessors are sympathetic to the fact that these are people who are, you know, you're not trying to employ them. You're not trying to make things hard for them. You just want to find out, have they dealt with the things? Have they demonstrated the behaviors in the workplace? Or do they know what to do if a situation was to arise? And then there's detailed notes get written up about that. They're linked to the occupational standards saying what behaviour should be demonstrated, a tick box exercise. And I'm going to say very few, because I don't know if it is absolutely nobody, but very few people struggle with that final professional discussion. And it loops back to the bit that when Mark and the employers say, put this person through the gateway, that's the thing that they really know about them beforehand, the employer particularly. They know that they can handle those questions. So as I said, at the start, it's not tough, it's rigorous. But for those who have had the support from NBKB and their employer, it's all but a piece of cake.
Wow. I guess that's the privilege of working in vocational further education like we have here at ICB, but it seems to me like the apprenticeship has that so firmly embedded in it, is by definition such a practical, real world learning opportunity. And we're really supporting people in getting those real world skills. I wonder if, Ian, you might be able to talk to us a bit about the value of payroll learning, and why do you think it's so important to nurture payroll staff?
Well, we're a big profession. There's a lot of people in the profession that are perhaps doing it without the necessary knowledges, skills, and behaviours. So this apprenticeship will give them the necessary knowledge, skills, and behaviours of the KSBs. So it will give them that. And even if they've been in the profession for 20 years, 30 years or something, it will maybe give them some new KSBs or consolidate the KSBs that they already know. Plus, it will give them a professional qualification. When I came into the apprenticeship back in 2017, my immediate or my initial objective was this is the tool that's going to get young people into the profession, that will be the future of the profession. Oh, I see, KSB, sorry, knowledge, skills, and behaviours. Sorry, knowledge, skills, and behaviours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really wanted it to be, I'm going to be getting 16, 17, 18-year-olds into the profession so that I can retire and know that the profession is in safe hands. However, as you went through, and as I became more and more au fait with the apprenticeship, yes, it is suitable for new people, but it's equally suitable for someone that's been in the profession for 30, 40, 50 years, and equally valid that it's there as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yes, it does. Yes, Valerie was very pleased about that. So I just asked, the KSBs, the knowledge, skills, and behaviours, do you feel like you have those as a bookkeeping professional or a payroll professional? And is that what you want for your employees? And maybe a question for Mark. Valerie's also asked, as a sole trader, can she put herself on an apprenticeship?
Yes, she can. Yeah.
She can?
Yeah.
If she's a sole trader? Yes,
we can find mentors and stuff to support. So yeah, there's a way. Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, really? Oh, fabulous. Okay, right. So you can, if you're running your own business, there is nothing to stop you becoming an apprentice yourself. So yeah, I would say get on the phone to Mark. Okay. What are the key sort of concerns that employers have when they first call you up, Mark?
I think there's, I suppose, in terms of broad apprenticeships, one of the things is the myth that it's a 16, 17-year-old. So, as Ian's already said, it's extremely valuable for existing employees to gap fill. And one of the things I always used to say to people, we'd be doing a presentation, and I say often the problem with most sectors, leadership's the same, payroll's the same, is that you do it this way because Maureen's told you to do it that way, and that's how you've learned to do that. And I actually did that in a meeting once, and the lady leaned forward and went, "No, I haven't," and it was Maureen, so I had to change it to a more obscure name to do that. But
it's always Maureen.
Yeah, so I think there's it's, the awareness is better now, but I think employers sometimes think that it's youngsters, and there's a barrier when they're talking to their employees as well. You've got a 40-year-old that's been doing a job for 10 years and so I want to put you on an apprenticeship. Are they offended by that? So breaking down that knowledge is one thing, and the understanding behind it. And I think the biggest barrier usually is the 20% off the job, because people see that, do the maths, say day release. I can't afford to lose my member of staff for a day a week. And once we've allayed those fears and shown how we can develop that, for example, we work with a local authority and their pensions guru was retiring. So they said, we need you to start with that. And we're like, absolutely. When it's an existing member of staff and they've been in the trade 30 years, but they want to upskill on pensions, not a problem. So we put them on our pensions module to start with, and they work shadow the pensions guru for the first 2 months of the apprenticeship, which pretty much achieved all their 20% off the job, because it doesn't have to be done uniformly throughout the program. It doesn't have to be 8 hours a week. You can front load it. We wouldn't recommend backloading it because you might run out of time, but front loading it for sure. So yeah, 20% off the job and making sure apprentices are valid for every age, which they are.
So do you play quite a big part in sort of designing that process with the employer?
Yes, we do. We've set out our plan that we call it structured flexibility, which, because I mean, who doesn't like an oxymoron, you know? So in its purest form, it's a list of all the modules we've got, and there's a score next to it for each apprentice, which basically is competent or would require more support. And then from that, we move to the list of, right, okay, so this is the training you need to do. What order do you want to do them in? And you know what's happening with the employer that's going to help. And then you start to develop the learner journey. And that's reviewed every 12 weeks as well, so it can move and change. So the flexibility is really good.
I think there's some really great, that's a really great buzzword, if it's one word. Structured flexibility. Yeah, sounds so fantastic.
Copyrighted.
Let's copyright that.
It's not, but it should be.
Oxymoron itself is a great word, or great 2 words. Just quickly, how much do you actually pay an apprentice? Do you get a special rate? Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe Ian actually knows more about this.
How much they're paid?
How much they're getting paid? You know, there's this idea that apprentices are earning like £2 an hour.
Oh, well, no, there's a minimum wage for apprentices, which all employers have got to abide by this minimum wage. But the how much an apprentice is paid under their contract of employment or contract of apprenticeship, which is actually a contract of employment, very much depends, like every employment, on where the employee is actually located. I mean, it really does. Although I would think in these days of Zoom and Teams and remote working, I've worked remotely for years and years and years, that location is perhaps less of a factor. Would you say that, Mark?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think it's a less of a factor now. You can't really justify the big London uplift anymore, like I think they used to. The conversation we always have to people say, can we pay apprentice minimum wage? And we say, yes, you can, because that's the legal minimum that you have to pay. However, why are you going to pay someone a pittance, which is what it is, but you're going to invest £9,000 in their training, you know, over 12 months? So I would suggest you align it to your proper salary structure and consider that, you know, it might well be an entrant person. However, this is a very professional career. So, you know, if you pay someone £11,000, you know, you're not going to buy that level of commitment and support. If you put someone on a proper salary, minimum of 15,000, you know, preferably more to the 20, then you're going to get somebody that's committed to you as an organization, and you're giving them the qualification. So you're building a long-term employee. So that, we recommend that, you know, what's your salary structure? Stick with that. Don't treat them like a second-rate citizen because they're an apprenticeship, because you get no support from them or us, in all honesty, because we'll say, well, you know, you're paying that as a minimum. That doesn't really gender loyalty, does it? So
yeah, and obviously ICB would certainly support proper salaries for payroll professionals. How many of the apprenticeships in your experience stay in the business?
We just done some destination data actually, and we got that to 78% at the moment, that, you know, once they've got their payroll qualification, have either stayed in payroll or gone on to a higher level. There are there does tend to be movement to HR or accounts. Particularly with the youngsters, but if you break it down by demographic, it's probably more like 95% for the more mature students that stay with payroll and with their sector. It's the youngsters that tend to skip around, that have done the payroll and now they want to try accounts or HR or something else. So.
That's very interesting. Actually, on that subject, Mihal, I think it could be Mihal Dave potentially, has just popped a little question in. He's actually struggling with the self-assessment tax exam. So if you're out there and you're in this same boat, you're not alone. He's had a few attempts and their pass mark is super high. He's got 78%. We've said it's got to be higher. And he's wondering, could you do an apprenticeship in self-assessment tax? I don't know, Peter, you've got any thoughts on that?
We don't assess one. I need to just check that one up. I'm not entirely sure if there's specifically a tax technician.
There's tax professionals, isn't there? Taxation.
Yeah.
Something we could potentially work on together. In the meantime, any recommendations for Mihal or anybody else struggling with those level 4 exams?
I'll probably take that one off here, but Mihal, if you want to send a note into ICB exams, just so that we know who you are, then I can have a look through what's been happening and try and get some advice back to you.
That's fantastic.
If that's okay, we've got Mihal's details, have we?
Yeah, I think
if someone can send that to me, I'll take a look.
And we've got training providers, we've got textbooks, so we would be more than happy to help with that. Now, somebody did ask for clarification. This is Kevin Jarvis. Hello, Kevin. He's messaged us via Facebook, just wanting clarification on the question of being a sole trader and getting an apprenticeship. Can you, is it the both? You can be a sole trader and get the apprenticeship for your employee, or be a sole trader and get the apprenticeship for yourself?
Yes, you can certainly get it for your employees. So it doesn't matter, whatever the legal contract status is. In terms of doing the apprenticeship for yourself, when you're a one-man band in essence, or a one-person band, then there are ways of doing that. It depends on which apprenticeship it is. So for example, if it's team leader or operations departmental manager level 5, you're being eligible because you don't have a team to manage. But if it's like corporate responsibility or payroll, then you can potentially do that. So I would suggest to reach out to us and or another training provider, and then we can see how we can source that for you.
That is totally fantastic. And actually there was another question from Facebook, yes, from Joseph Navales Placer. He wants to know if the question is do you get a free certificate? Which is a great question.
Yes. What, a free one?
Do you get a free certificate at the end of it?
Well, absolutely, and it's from the Education and Skills Funding Agency. So it is a proper qualification, and that was something we struggled with initially when I was trying to sell it to payroll professionals, and they said, "Well, it's not a real qualification. I don't get letters after my name. I don't get fancy recognition." And I said, "It is a proper qualification." And then what I started saying was, I believe it's the professional qualification, to be quite honest, because it's a qualification that's been built for payroll professionals by payroll professionals, and it's delivered by payroll professionals. And a lot of qualifications out there, which might give you letters after name, and might give you a fancy membership card, have been built by the organization themselves. This has been built by employers. So everything, all of the knowledges, the skills, the behaviors, the assessment methods, wasn't something that I invented. It wasn't something the ICB could accommodate or Mark could teach. It was what employers wanted. And that's really important. That's why I believe that an apprenticeship, specifically this one, is the professional qualification. And I'm sure, Mark, you'd agree with me.
100%. And I think, one of the things that I always say is, this is a driving license. People will often ask for, how does it compare to other qualifications that are out there and have been well known longer? And I'd say, well, if you look at those, they tend to be very technical and theory based, which is kind of like the highway code. This is a driving license, and you'll be able to drive at the end of it. And that's the analogy that I tend to use.
Yeah, it's technical and it's vocational as well. And that's really built into the endpoint assessment methods where you've got this multiple choice. Where in our day-to-day world, we're always having to sort of like recall things from our brain. The role simulation, we're always having to communicate to employees, to talk to our managers, to talk up, to talk down. That's what the role simulation is about. And then the professional discussion is, well, what do you actually do in your workplace? So it's technical, which we must know. It's conversational, demonstrating the knowledge and the skills, but we actually relate it to the workplace. And that's all via the professional discussion. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think it's flipping excellent.
It's flipping excellent. It's structured flexibility. There's no flab. This just sounds wonderful. And I'm so pleased to hear that Valerie is possibly, we're helping Valerie figure out how this is going to work for her business. Let's just run this by our experts. She's considering restructuring and offering an HR service to her clients. Could I recruit someone and they do a payroll and HR apprenticeship at the same time?
No, you can only do one apprenticeship at a time. So
as in not either payroll or HR, so they're separate.
Yeah, yes, they're separate. So what we do, again, I'm going to go back to our buzzword, with the structured flexibility, we offer enhancement. So people that are doing our payroll level 3 can add 2 modules from anything else that we do. So they can pick 2 modules from HR3 and bolt that in to give them that extra support and guidance, or accounts or leadership, whatever they want to do. But we do also, this sounds like a sales pitch, so I apologize in advance. We do also do the HR level 3 and the HR5 apprenticeships. So what we would suggest is a conversation with Valerie. What's the job description? What do you really want to get from it? You know, what does your individual need? And then choose a path through either the payroll route or the HR route. And of course you can do the other one after, so there wouldn't be a problem with that.
Well, that's fantastic. But critically, yeah, if you are looking to recruit somebody new for your practice, you should be considering an apprenticeship.
Absolutely.
I think that's pretty clear. Well, fantastic.
Can I just say something about recruiting? Because the national insurance is going up terrifically next. Somebody's national insurance is probably going to increase by about 8%, regardless of what HMRC say. It's going to go up about 7-8%, and that's for the employer as well. But as long as the employee or apprentice is paid under £50,000, there's no national insurance for the employer with the apprenticeship upper secondary threshold. So that's an incentive. It shouldn't be the incentive, but it's maybe you're going to save a lot of money in national insurance. And there was these incentives, but they've stopped now, Mark, haven't they?
Yeah, sadly, 31st of January was the last. You had to employ somebody by the 31st of Jan, and then they need to commence an apprenticeship by March. So if you've recently taken on a new employee and they're on your payroll POE before the 31st of Jan, they're eligible for a £3,000 incentive as long as they commence an apprenticeship before the 30th of March. So if you've got a new employee you haven't done anything with, you do have time to get them on an apprenticeship, and then you'd be eligible for this £3,000 incentive from the government. £1,500 paid at 3 months and £1,500 paid at 12.
Well, that's major. So that, get in there quick if you have just happen to have employed someone before the end of last month. And is there a £1,000 incentive for certain apprentices that's still applicable?
Yes, so it's the 16 to 18 apprenticeship incentive. So that's irrelevant of whether they're a new employee or an existing employee. If they're under the age of 19, even by one day, they're eligible for £1,000 incentive. So again, payable 3 months and 12 months, 500 and 500 to the employer.
Such a win-win. And just to clarify, that NI break for your apprentice, is that throughout the length of the apprenticeship?
As long as the apprentice is under 25 on payday, maybe I should have said that. As long as they, so it's really the incentive for an employer to take on young people. So the apprentice has got to be studying a recognised apprenticeship, and it doesn't matter if there's a recognised apprenticeship in England, and this payroll standard does only apply in England. but there are recognised apprenticeships in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. But as long as it's a government recognised apprenticeship and on payday, the apprentice is under 25, that's when the national insurance break kicks in. And I think it's something that employers should really, really consider. I really, really do.
And just sort of quickly to kind of sum up, whilst some of the important myth busting we've been trying to do is around saying that apprentices don't have to be young people. They can be 60, like Lynn, as you posted in the chat. They can be an existing employee who you want to upskill. How, Ian, what do normal payroll apprentices look like, and why do you think it's important to encourage more young people to join the profession?
What do they look like?
I mean, are payroll apprentices on the whole like, construction apprentices in terms of their age and their gender and their demographics?
Oh, no, I've talked to apprentices that are just every subject. You've got bookkeepers, you've got public sector, you've got private sector, just everywhere. So this apprenticeship is relevant for people of all ages, of all disciplines, in all sectors. So that's my experience of talking to people. Mark probably has got equal experience of that. It's just from anywhere, isn't it?
It is. It is from anywhere, and I think there isn't a sort of one size fits all typical payroller. It just needs to be somebody that's got that passion and wants to have that learning opportunity really and go into it. I think people do. It's historic, isn't it, that people fall into payroll? You ask, and
then you don't fall out.
You fall out with it, but you don't fall out of it, possibly.
You fall, and you fall out of love with it. And I would love to see the apprenticeship take on more young people. I really would, because there is a real gap at the bottom. There's a lot of knowledge, skills and behaviours at the top and the middle of the payroll. But, the likes of myself, I'm probably not going to be around in 10 years' time. Well, professionally. The younger people. And that was really interesting in the demographics that the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education sent me, compared to the rest of the apprenticeships in the United Kingdom. Well, it's actually in England. The payroll one was significantly used more by people over the age of 25. Whereas the rest of the apprenticeships in England, there was more younger people coming in. So I'd love to see younger people coming in, but it's equally valid for young people, middle-aged people, old people. It really is, and it gives you this professional, vocational, and technical qualification.
I think we're addressing that. I think we're getting some of the youngsters in, and there are more and more adverts and roles going out there now. And I think it's the change that people want to come into payroll now and haven't fell into it. They've chosen to take this career path. So that's really positive, I think.
And maybe the apprenticeship has done something about that. Maybe it's given some credibility to the profession.
For sure. Exposure, definitely.
Yeah, I think this is one of those years, I think, where we are really upping the exposure on the payroll profession. And Peter, just sort of final word from you, what kind of businesses don't need a payroll professional in them? What's the future looking like for payroll professionals?
Did you say what kind of businesses don't need?
What kind of business? I'm hoping you're going to say none of them.
Yeah, I was just double checking. That's the thing. So working in exams, you're going to double check the questions. Yeah,
read the question.
That was a negative. So yes, the answer is none. And actually, I've just seen the message coming up from Valerie there, Mark. She's looked.
I've seen that as well.
She's looked very closely at your wall. I noticed that on an earlier Zoom with Mark. But no, you're right. The only ones that, knowing about payroll, knowing about tax liabilities, knowing about national insurance, I think it's fundamentally important to, I suppose, anyone as an employee. So it is vital. And like I said earlier on, the thing about this apprenticeship, probably more than the other ones that I'm familiar with, is that it is so very well catered directly towards employability, as in of the apprentice. I'm aware of other apprenticeships, not necessarily ones that we do the endpoint assessment for, but they're sort of retrofitted to qualifications that already existed, and didn't take that zero-based blank sheet of paper approach and said, right, what does the employment market, what do the employers really need from someone who does such and such? And in the case of payroll assistant, I wasn't there in 2017 when Ian took over, but I get a very strong impression that, you know, they started with a blank sheet of paper.
We started at the beginning. We disregarded some of the commercial qualifications that were available.
Yeah.
We totally disregarded them and said, what do employers need? What do employers want? And what do employers need? And we built the qualification. And I hope that some of these commercial qualifications will look at what employers need and maybe crib from that. Whether or not they've done that, I don't know. I don't look at commercial qualifications. I'm only interested in apprenticeship.
I'm afraid I have for many a long year, and I know their strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps completely independent of that, I would just say in a much broader sense, to anyone who is looking at some. It happens that I have my middle son is coming up to 18, and he's applying for universities just now, and he's not sure what job he wants to go into, so maybe university is a good thing for him to bide some time. But where you've got, if you've got anyone who knows where they want their career to go, and obviously my experience is in finance and business and so on, I would be looking at apprenticeships before looking at university for those people. Partly because a lot of the apprentices really mirror what the professional qualifications are. And of course, employers, the bigger employers are looking to use up apprenticeship levies and so forth. And I think in some cases, the value of a university degree in, say, business and finance, it's reducing because the apprenticeships are doing the same job and giving that very practical, you know, tying it in with the workplace experience and giving a more rounded learning experience. So, you know, I think apprenticeships they're here. I think they're here to stay. And I think, you know, the payroll is a very good model of how they should work. So yeah, anyone should look at them for, if they have offspring of late teenage years and they're wondering where to go, definitely look at them. Yeah, and it's so different to when I was a youth. You know, apprentice was a guy who went out in a van with somebody who could already do the job, and you know, whether it was plumbing or mechanic or whatever, it is so different now. So it's a really valuable learning experience.
Wonderful. And without the years of student debt over your head.
It would be nice to know we didn't have that coming our way, but unfortunately we do.
Too late for you. So that's absolutely wonderful. I'm just wondering if, Mark, you might give us a sort of final word of encouragement for anybody watching this today and thinking, you know what, I think this might be for me, but I've got lots of questions. How can they approach you to get some answers?
Okay, yeah, so thanks to everybody for making time to come and talk to us today, and thank you all on the panel. It's been a really insightful and enjoyable chat as well, which is great. So I think final words on the apprenticeship, really to reiterate what Peter's just said, you know, simple things. There's no student debt, you know, you don't have that loan, the employer's investing in you. Secondly, it's flexible, so it can be tailored around what you need and your learning styles, which you're not going to get a formal education placement. And thirdly, you know, and I think most importantly for the employer, they're learning your processes. So the policies, procedures, protocols that they're learning are yours. So they're not just somebody that knows how to do X, Y, and Z and has done it at another organization. They know how to do your X, Y, and Z, and you can tailor that as well. So I think it's that bespokeness to apprenticeships. So, I mean, all apprenticeship providers will do it that way. I mean, we clearly think we do it better than the majority, but other providers, will do the same and offer the same as well. So.
And we love working with the NBKB. So you can head over to our website. If you put the website URL and /apprenticeships in the search bar, you will come to our apprenticeship information pages. And we are the endpoint assessor for 3 standards, not just payroll, but also namely assistant accountant and also accounts and finance assistant, which is a level 2. NBKB can help you recruit an apprentice. They can help design the training for your business and your employee. And they can also, I'm sure, put you on the right route if you want a raft of different apprenticeships. But we are here to support you. We're always on the end of the phone. And I would like to wish you a very happy National Apprenticeship Week. The weekend is upon us, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Have a lovely afternoon.
Cheers.